has many roots, and it is quite as bad as you were saying. And in its modern version, it comes from the left and the right, and from the Islamists, and I think from some curious academics and public figures. And it comes especially, as it has, I think, through the centuries, from those who want power over people. Because what happened out there in the Sinai some 4,000 or so years ago, one of the two most important events in human history, set up a situation in which a tribe of Semitic refugees from slavery in Egypt suddenly received the law. And the law did not say, "Thou shalt not kill Israelites." It said, "Thou shalt not kill," and so on. It has come to be the basis over the centuries of what we mean here in the United States when we say we have a government of laws, not men. We don't deal with whim. And dictators and autocrats believe that their word is law. There is nothing above them. And the ultimate challenge to them is this people who for thousands of years, in their behavior and the dress of the Orthodox and the dietary rules and everything, says we have our laws and they are not from you. That is a terrible affront to a dictator or autocrat. And it's why, as Pastor Niemöller, another German pastor of the Third Reich era, who was a man of great character, that is why Pastor Niemöller, speaking critically of himself, said, "They came for the socialists, and I wasn't a socialist, so I did nothing. And they came for the Jews, and I wasn't a Jew, so I did nothing. And they came for the Catholics, and I wasn't a Catholic, so I did nothing. And then they came for me." The problem with our not standing up for our Jewish friends, as they are brought under the kind of attacks that they are these days, is that we are, in the end, betraying ourselves as well. And the kinds of attacks they face are of many varieties, challenges to Israel's right to exist and the rest, sometimes masquerading as critiques of Israeli foreign policy. It's easy to criticize Israel's foreign policy. They sometimes make mistakes. But the point is that what the anti-Semites do is change the rules for Israel and the Jews. Take the question of whether there should be any settlements in the West Bank. Well, there are now in Israel, within its 67 borders, approximately a population of 6 million plus, and about 1/6 of that, about 1 million people, are Arab and mostly Muslim. They are citizens of Israel, Israeli Arabs. They have their own representatives in the Knesset. Until relatively recently, they had a Supreme Court justice. They had a cabinet member. They have publications. They have radios. They have mosques. You can hear the muezzin calling from the mosques in Jaffa as you walk around Tel Aviv. And most importantly, they go to sleep at night without worrying that someone's going to kick down the door and kill them. Now, I asked Salam Fayyad, the Palestinian Prime Minister, at a meeting a year and a half ago in Aspen, Colorado, on television, so this is all recorded. I went through that with him, and I said, you want a separate Palestinian state. If an agreement is reached and such a state is established, would you treat Jews or Israelis who want to live in Palestine, call it, because of a historic affinity for Hebron or for whatever reason, would you treat them as well as the Israeli Arabs are treated by Israel? He said yes, absolutely. They would have full freedom of religion, and we would offer freedom of religion to anyone who wanted to live in that country. Ever since, he said it in English in Colorado, not in Arabic in the West Bank. But every few months it gets walked back. And now the question has finally been determined. The Palestinian leader Abbas said the other day that that Palestine should be essentially Judenfrei, free of Jews. Why is it that we even consider a balance other than one in which there could be approximately as many Jews or settlers living in a Palestinian state, approximately as the same percentage, as Muslim Arabs living in Israel? That would double anyway the number of settlers, Israeli settlers in Palestine. No one even asks the question because the game has been changed. The rules are different for Jews. They are automatically required to accept the fact that they have 1 million Palestinian Arabs, mainly Muslims, and that they should treat them fairly, and that according to much of the world's press and many of the world's countries, that should have nothing to do with the fact that they might have some right to settle and live in a Palestinian state. It's what the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan called defining deviancy down. You couldn't expect the Palestinians to accept Jewish settlers. The Palestinians would kill them. Everybody knows that. So why are you even bringing this up, Woolsey? That's an insult, in a sense, to the Palestinians. It's saying, we know you're killers. We expect you to be killers, so we aren't going to put you under the same type of obligation that we put Israel. Take another one. The end of World War II, millions of people displaced by the shifting boundaries of the war moved in Europe. Poland, for example, moved about 200 miles west. The Sudeten Germans moved. Lots of people moved, were displaced, lost their homes. A number of people moved in the Middle East. 2 years after World War II, as Israel was being born in 1947-48, there was also movement. There were several hundred thousand Palestinians in what became Israel who moved east. Some of them did not, some stayed. There were several hundred thousand Jews in Baghdad, Damascus, Amman, various places, Beirut, who moved to Israel. Now let me see. Why is it that we have a special UN agency, UNWRA, for the Palestinians who moved and their children and grandchildren, but not recognize any rights of the Jews to the property they left? If you want to cash everybody out and say, okay, if you lost land in the West, Palestinians, we'll figure how much that was and we'll pay you for it. But by the same token, if the Jewish population of Baghdad and Damascus and the rest, many of them were very prominent citizens, lost in moving west, lost resources, they should be compensated too. Why does the right of return never surface as an issue of balance?